Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 351, and I had a conversation with Peter Mehlman. Peter is a producer, actor, author. It Won't Always Be This Great, hashtag Me As Well, a novel, and Mandela Was Late, TV writer, most famously for Seinfeld. He's responsible for memorable Seinfeld utterances like Shrinkage, double dipping, yada yada yada, Sponge-worthy, They're Real, and They're Spectacular, to name a few of the things that he's well known for. The former sports journalist cut his teeth with Howard Cosell and has written for dozens of publications, including New York Times Magazine, GQ, Esquire, and pretty much every women's magazine you can think of. He's currently working on his new book, Parenting Tips from a Childless Man. Okay, I had a really fantastic past week working on my new movie. The first directing, I wrote it. The cast and crew were extraordinary. 35 of us moving around an incredible locations, beautiful house in Altadena, and wow, my mind is blown. It was so much fun. It was super hard work, and it looks incredible. I'm so excited to put it together, and I'll keep you posted on everything. But wow, it was really great. It was really, really great. But without fail, I'm still getting the podcast out. This will be the first time that I recorded, edited, and did all the stuff for the podcast in one full swoop of 3-hour period. So if you catch some errors or weird stuff, take it easy on me. It's been a big week. Check out heyhumanpodcast.com for links, Hey Human merch, and to learn more about my guests and the show. Check out susanruth.com to learn more about me and my other artistic endeavors. Please follow Susan Ruthism and Hey Human Podcast on social media. You can find my albums on Apple Music or wherever you get your music. Most recently, the record All I Ever Wanted Was Everything. But I'm working on new music now. I keep saying it, but I'm hoping by the end of the year I will have an EP out too. Also, please check out my relationships and sex show, Are We There Yet?, with sexologist and healthcare practitioner Mara Edelman. It's on YouTube under youtube.com/Are We There Yet podcast show. We also give away toys every month, so it's very exciting. So check it out, subscribe, and be a part of the revolutionary idea of being open and honest about relationships and sex. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Hey Human is ad-free, and your donations help with keeping it so. There's a contribution button on the heyhumanpodcast.com website. Feel free to use it. All right. Thank you for listening. Be well, be kind, be love, take care of each other, and here we go. Peter Mehlman, welcome to Hey Human.
Thank you. I'm glad I qualify.
Absolutely. I mean, you had to get through so many breakfasts before I let you on the show.
I know. Well, it was a gauntlet, I'll tell you that.
It's just like it's spend time with Ike and give him bacon.
It was a bacon gauntlet.
It was a bacon gauntlet. Well, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here. And I'm excited. I adore you. I think you're hilarious and wonderful. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Let's talk about where you are from. How was your upbringing? Did you grow up in a very creative household?
I am tempted to say not really, but I guess in a way. I mean, I grew up in Queens, New York, and, my father is an engineer and my mother worked at a school, but, they did take us to shows, we left Queens, went into the city and saw shows all the time, museums. And every year my parents got unbelievable great tickets for my brother and I to see Leonard Bernstein's Young People's Concert at Philharmonic Hall. I mean, we felt like, we referred to Leonard Bernstein as Lenny. I mean, we were so tight with him, and I have a Hirschfeld of Leonard Bernstein right on my wall.
You've got a lot of really cool art in your house.
Yeah, it's so funny that people say that, because my whole philosophy of collecting is that I have no taste in art. So I basically went for, photojournalism.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that part of your life also, just the journalistic part. Did you play sports as a kid?
Yeah, tons.
Basketball?
Little league baseball and football with my friends, and then basketball completely took over.
Yeah. Was it a funny household? I mean, you're Jewish, it goes without saying, but was it a funny household?
My mom is really funny. My father was kind of like a very low-key guy, kind of shy, but he made great puns and things like that.
Yeah.
His puns were amazing. And one thing I'll never forget is like when I moved out here and my parents came to visit, and I was, playing a then cassette in my car of Linda Ronstadt singing all those Nelson Riddle songs. And my father was singing along, and my mother goes, "God, Jim, you know all the words." And my father goes, "Hey, I wasn't always married." And that was kind of like his sense of humor.
It's kind of your sense of humor too.
Yeah, I don't know, I do remember that, kind of being funny was like important to me.
Mm-hmm. Did you write at a young age, or was that something that came later?
That came much later.
What were your aspirations when you were young?
Well, I bought into the whole propaganda that I should become a doctor. I mean, my mom bought me a stethoscope for my 8th birthday. And in 4th grade, I actually wrote a letter to Michael DeBakey, who was like the foremost heart surgeon in the world at that time. He did the first artificial heart. And the interesting thing about that is that he also perfected this surgery for, to correct like aortic aneurysms. Mm. And years later, my father had that surgery, and it basically added, 20 years to his life.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Giving you a stethoscope could have meant that she wanted you to be a safecracker.
Yeah, if only. The funny thing is, like all those years later, I mean, it was just like two rubber tubes then going down to, and they all kind of, after a while, it all kind of disintegrated and everything like that. Now all I have left is the ear thing.
You still have it?
I still have the ear part, just the top. Yeah.
Oh, I love that you still have it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Big family, little family?
Little, just my brother and I.
Do you guys get along?
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. Sometimes there can be rivalry when it's same-sex siblings.
Oh, no, it was, the funny thing is, like, he was like big and, physically big. Even in like, by like 9th grade, he was pretty, and I was like really short and unbelievably skinny. I mean, and, there was no like sibling rivalry there. I was just a kid brother. We went to all these Knicks playoff games together and everything like that, like rooting for the Knicks back then was like a big deal. And I didn't even grow till college. But I think I was like 5'8" when I graduated high school. And then like by the middle of my sophomore year of college, I was 6'1". And now I'm back down to 5'8".
Basketball is really quite a part of being a New Yorker, I feel like, more than any other sport there.
Yeah, it's a real New York City game. Mm-hmm. Although, I mean, the funny thing is now, a lot of the great pros come from everywhere. I mean, everywhere around the world, but it's amazing how many players are from Seattle and Oakland and LA. LA is like the breeding ground for NBA players now. But New York was it back then. All the great players were New Yorkers.
They grow us tall on the West Coast.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's more room. There's more space to grow.
That's right.
Maybe that's why I grew when I was in college.
More space to grow. I mean, why not? I grew an extra inch when I was in college, which surprised me.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have the overwhelming pressure of parents.
Yeah, you're 5'10".
I'm 6'1".
No.
Yeah.
I thought you were 5'10".
Mm-mm.
Oh, I thought we had this conversation. Oh, maybe we just had this conversation about you being tall the first time we had breakfast. Because I remember we're talking about, like, I'm so sick of all these girls who are 5'2". Remember that conversation?
I did. Well, all of my best friends are quite short. So my whole life, my best friends along the way have been quite little. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what that's about. I think it's just opposites attract. We met in such a funny circumstance. I was having coffee with my friends Joel and Russ, and you were walking by with Ike, and I leapt upon your dog. Dogs for me are the gateway to humans, really.
That was like the pleasant stranger on the street with Ike, as opposed to, I probably told you this about, like, this one woman was playing with Ike one day and she says to me, "Oh God, he's so cute. Did you adopt him?" And I said, "No, he's my biological dog." And she totally didn't laugh. In fact, she said, "If you had ever been to a kill shelter, you wouldn't be making jokes about it." I was like, "Oh, what a world. I don't belong here anymore."
Oh. Well, so you went off to college. Did you stay in New York for college?
No, I went to University of Maryland.
What were you into at the time?
Pre-med lasted like one semester. And then in the second semester, I wandered into the student newspaper office. I don't even remember, but I just wandered to the student newspaper office and said, "I'd like to write." They assigned me an article about workers in one of the libraries trying to unionize. And I took it like dead seriously. I wrote this piece and they thought, "Wow, this is, for a shitty assignment, this is really good." And I don't know, I just got totally turned on by it.
Yeah. That's so interesting to me that you didn't grow up thinking about being a writer and literally walked right through the door to it.
Yeah. I mean, like, I always think about, like, I see people on the street and I always wonder if, like, they have unbelievable talent to play, like, piano and they have no idea. There are people who have, I always wonder about people having extraordinary talents or talent or affinity for anything and not ever realizing it. And, I'm grateful that I somehow figured out that I would like to write.
So your career started in journalism.
Yes.
And did you immediately go into sports writing, or was that something that came later?
No, well, the first job I had was at the Washington Post. And, like, at first I was like a copy aide, but, I was so incompetent at that. Like, I would hang up on people by accident when they were filing stories, and, they'd be out of town. And I mean, they started calling me Moon Man because I seemed so spaced out about these kind of things, but they just started letting me write, which was good, nothing like failing up. The funny thing is, like, through sports writing, I was just on the phone a couple hours ago with this guy who was at the Washington Star when I was at the Washington Post. And this is, 1980. And he was just, hitting me up for $10,000 for
Really?
for some project he's working on. I always used to joke that like college is the place where you'll meet people who'll haunt you for the rest of your life. This is a little bit post-college, but I still believe that.
Then did you set your sights on and think that, okay, now I'm a sports writer, this is what I'm going to be doing? Because I know you're politically involved now, but was that on your plate back then?
No, and I kind of wish it were. But I mean, you know how like you look back at yourself when you're 20 or 22 and everything, and you're like inevitably come to the conclusion of like, oh God, I was such an idiot. Like I watched All the President's Men like 30 times, and I don't to this day I don't quite understand why like it didn't move me in that direction, because I loved and I found it inspiring. But All the President's Men is not exactly inspiring you to be a sports writer. I started covering some professional sporting events, and I would be interviewing people that, athletes who I admired from afar, and I found myself feeling embarrassed. I'd be asking a pitcher who was a really intelligent guy, like this famous great pitcher named Jim Palmer. I remember interviewing him and thinking, this is so silly that I'm interviewing this guy about, talking to this guy about why he threw a 3-2 curveball. I mean, who cares? And the funny thing is, I had an interview when I moved back to New York, and I got this job interview with Howard Cosell, who was like the biggest sports TV journalist of all time. I told him that story, and that's basically why he hired me, because he wanted people who realized that sports was a sandbox, and that the only interesting thing about it was connecting it to the real world. Because people want sports to be their Camelot, their escape. And when sports invades the real world, you see what happens. Colin Kaepernick, and they go out of their minds.
They go out of their minds. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I was such a sports fan, and, I still follow sports. My 2.5 years of working for Howard Cosell really kind of cynicized me to a lot of it.
What was he like?
Incredibly funny, brilliant, crazy, insecure, but it was fascinating. It was like being in the middle of the sports universe. And, he had no matter how much, he used to be, every year he'd be listed among the top 10 most admired and the top 10 most hated people in America.
Yes, you're doing something right when when you're on both lists.
And as much as people hated him, the athletes totally respected him. They always knew they'd get a fair shake, and he would ask, reasonable, smart questions. So it was fascinating being around him. It really was.
What do you think one of the greatest lessons you got from him was?
The greatest lesson I got from him was to kind of question everything. To look behind what people are saying, or to look away from what people were saying and look at what they're doing. And he was amazing at that. He was very perceptive, and he understood the politics of people and the law, and so much of what you love about sports can be based in so much hypocrisy. And if you really enjoy being a sports fan, working for Howard Cosell was not the way to go. But if you're interested in, truth, then it was great.
Did you realize you were funny at an early age? I mean, you said that your dad had that sort of more subtle and punny humor, and that mom was funny, but did you know you were funny?
I didn't know. I was like, amazingly unself-aware. Like, or I didn't focus on it. Like I remember, like, even when I went to college, I mean, I'd see these kids from like rich towns in Long Island and think, like, have this vague thought about how confident they seemed, especially like around girls and things like that. And I was like, I'm so much better at that. Like thinking that they're not funny. They're not, like that was when that was probably my realization that I might be funny, because I remember thinking, how could she be with him? He's like, she probably never laughs.
It's true. Laughter is an aphrodisiac. It's certainly something that keeps the sparks going, in my humble opinion. What transitioned you out of the sports journalism into the next phase of life?
Getting laid off.
That'll do it.
After 2 years at ABC, 2.5 years at ABC, I worked for Howard. The only time I ever covered a live event, because the show I worked on with Howard Cosell was a sports journalism program. I never covered live event. I never worked at a live event. But for the '84 Olympics, Howard had me working on the instant replays for boxing. And the level of corporate waste for those '84 Olympics was so over the top crazy that by November, they had to start thinking about layoffs. And then on December 15th, I got laid off, December 15th, 1984. And there was a part of me that was almost relieved. Like I felt like it was time to move on. Like, writing for Howard Cosell is not exactly writing, because you have to write in his voice, not yours. But it was really weird because, like, I went to a party that night and had the best time. And the next morning I woke up and the room was spinning. I had an inner ear virus that was probably just sitting in me, and all it took was like one little life jolt. And, so for like 10 days, it was like, but, it was good. And then, I was kind of like trying to figure out what was next. And I, did some job interviews in TV and stuff like that. And then I had this idea for an article, and I just wrote it, this kind of humor piece. I just wrote this piece called the "We Just Broke Up Last Night" diet, about what happens to a guy on the 5 days after he's been dumped. And somehow I got a contact with an editor at Glamour magazine, and she said, well, it's not really right for us, but I'm going to send it to Mademoiselle magazine. No longer exists. And they bought it up and wanted me to do more and more kind of stuff from a male point of view and things like that. And I was like, this seems like fun, And then I just got to write for all these different magazines, especially in the Condé Nast building.
Which was a ton of magazines in there.
Yeah. And like, I think they're in the World Trade Center now, but then they were in these offices, like a 6-7 floor building on Madison Avenue. And just riding the elevators was more fun than anything in the world, because I mean, like, it was the gorgeous girl capital of the world. I mean, like all these kind of like rich, gorgeous girls who were underpaid, but they were like all in like leather mini skirts, and like it was crazy. It was so much fun, and I'd go from, I wrote a lot for GQ, and then like one editor would go to another magazine and I'd get in there, I'd write for Self magazine and Mademoiselle and Glamour, and it was just really fun.
Is there an archive somewhere with all your articles? Do you keep that?
I have most of them. I really got to organize this. I really got to start organizing it. because I have like all these magazines that piled up, in drawers and stuff like that. So much I never get around to.
Yeah. Life is like that.
Yeah.
How did Seinfeld happen?
One of the articles I wrote which was published in October of 1988, was a piece I wrote in the New York Times magazine. They used to have a column called About Men, where, and it was never funny. And it was always like the subjects were like my favorite baseball man, just like, ooh. I wrote about this day where I just had a breakup with a girl who I had been with for 2 years, and she was at Yale Business School. And I was going up there every weekend, and then we broke up, and I had, I was at kind of a loss for planning a solo weekend. And I walked out on the street and I saw this guy who I thought was a broadcaster on ABC, but when I got close, it wasn't him. And my friends and I were such great celebrity spotters in New York that I decided, you know what, I'll just walk around the city till I spot a celebrity, and then I'll go home. That would be my day. And that was the skeleton of the story. And off that, there were all these digressions about life and love in New York. The piece was in the New York Times. When the day it came out, I went out. I was like, in the morning, I went out to breakfast with some friends. And then we did some things around the city. And when I got home, I had like 70 messages on my answering machine, mostly from strangers. And so anyway, like a year later, I felt like a change. And I really had such a good time in LA during the Olympics that I decided to, just change my life up and move to LA. And about a year, more than a year into my time in LA, I bumped into Larry David, who I had met in New York, I think twice. And we were just talking, and then he said, I'm doing this little TV show with Jerry Seinfeld. Maybe you could, write a script for us. And he asked me for a writing sample, which I later found out he was asking several people the same, he was hitting up the same, but I didn't have a script. So I gave him that article from the New York Times, and he passed it on to Jerry. And Jerry was kind of like, everybody else was turning in scripts, and he wasn't like impressed with any of them, but he just loved my article. So I got a chance to write a script. And I really didn't know what I was doing, but I did it, and it came out okay, and I got hired. And next thing you know, I was loaded.
It's so bonkers to think that a casual conversation, and that you weren't afraid to say, well, I've never written a script, so I can't do that. That you were like, well, here's my writing. And the fact that was a show centered around everyday life in New York, it seems quite logical that article would be the thing that sparked interest.
Yeah. I didn't actually say to him, I've never written the script. He asked for a writing sample, and I just gave him that. I didn't say that I never wrote.
No, I can't imagine you would say that. But I'm saying internally that you didn't have the dialogue with yourself that said, oh, I can't do this because I've never done this thing. You didn't. Right. Yeah. That you just kept going forward is impressive. A lot of people wouldn't do that. A lot of people would say, oh, I'm not right for that because I've never done this thing, and that's scary. But you just said, yep, here you go. Here's some of my writing.
I'll tell you that, when I went in the first time to meet with them, they gave me tapes of the 3 episodes at that point that they had ever shot. And I remember watching them, and like all of a sudden I was nervous. Like at first I was thinking, oh, I'll write a script, I'll get paid, like really good money, and then I'll go back to writing magazines. Then I see the 3 episodes, and I'm like, oh my God, I really like this. Like then I started getting like a little nervous. But yeah, I kind of dove in.
The thing with Seinfeld that always struck me is there's this group of people that never learn anything. They never get better. They just are terrible all the way through to the end. And it's so interesting because so many shows, want an arc that people get redemption. And there's not a lot of redemption around the main cast of characters. They're so lovable. That must have been a ball to write that.
Well, as you've probably heard before, the philosophy of the show was no hugging, no learning.
I didn't know that, but that makes sense.
Yeah. It was so much fun, like it was just so much fun to just focus on what was funny and not what was, safe or right or,
Mm-hmm.
I told you that I've been writing this book called Parenting Tips from a Childless Man. And I was just writing about if you're being worried that your child is like really unattractive. And, I wrote the episode that included the storyline about the ugly baby. And, I remember I didn't have any conscience about people saying, oh my God, I'm in that situation. It was just funny. So you could just go with it,
Mm-hmm.
It was very liberating to just be funny without really worrying about any ramifications.
Yeah, for sure. I get that completely. It was definitely a different era, intelligent. The thing is the truth of the matter is that most human beings don't evolve. They don't figure shit out. They don't get redemption. They make the same stupid mistakes over and over again. We're all a disaster for the most part. And so I think that's what made that show so delightful, is because as much as we'd like to think we're the good guy that's going to figure everything out and have everything wonderful happen, truth of the matter, that's just not real life. We probably won't figure it out. We're probably going to be making the same dumbass decisions, and they just have different hats on, the different people and whatnot.
Probably. I always think that especially when you're in your 20s, you could look back every 2 years and think, oh my God, I was such an idiot when I was 24. And then when you're 28, you look back, oh my God, I was such an idiot when I was 26. And, when do you ever catch up with yourself?
Right. For sure.
And some people never do. And some people at least come close.
Yeah. If you could step outside of yourself and think about, is it weird to think that you created Get Out and yada, 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 and Spongeworthy and all these iconic zeitgeist that those are things that will be in our lexicon forever that you created? It's pretty wild, really.
I know. No, I can't seem to step out. And I hear it all the time. And look, I'm happy about it. It's kind of gratifying, but I kind of get asked how that feels so much that I start thinking that it should feel a lot better.
Not necessarily better or worse. It's just surreal. I can't imagine. There's no right or wrong to it. It's just got to be surreal. Just having a conversation with somebody, with you, for example, we're just talking and I was like, and yada, yada, yada. And then there's a moment where we both look at each other. We haven't done that, but I'm just saying there's that moment where we look at each other and like, oh, that's awkward.
Yeah. It's funny, I see people on TV say it and I don't even really acknowledge it.
It's interesting.
I don't know. I mean, or I acknowledge it like every other person might, oh, he's a yada yada guy as opposed to a blah 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 guy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah. It's a very weird thing. I really haven't come to any kind of terms about how about that. And the funny thing is, I didn't even know I created about the one about Get Out. I know it, I guess I did, but like it was in the first episode. I know I wrote it, but like I didn't even, that was the others. It was like most of them were like coming up with a term for something out of necessity. Like Spongeworthy comes, or shrinkage. Those words didn't exist. Those phrases are double dipping. And you had to come up with something kind of out of necessity. But, Get Out was just like, I don't know, isn't that, I guess, Julia sold that more than I did. Julia Louis-Dreyfus has totally sold that.
Yeah, she's fantastic. How lucky for you as a writer to have such an exceptional group of actors.
Unbelievable. They always made first of all, like 90% of the time where you had a thought of how a line should be read, it wouldn't come out that way when they did it. And then you'd be like, oh my God, that's actually much better. I mean, especially, Julia and Jason, they came up with ways of saying things that, like you never thought.
Yeah, because Jerry wasn't really an actor, right? No, yeah.
But he got better at it. He got a lot better at it.
Oh, for sure. It's like Will Smith with the Fresh Prince. You grow into yourself as you're going. Yeah.
I think once the show was popular enough and Jerry was freed up to be a bit of a prick, that's when his acting really took off. Because, like, when the show is Seinfeld, at first you immediately back then would think, well, I'm the sane center of the show, I can't be a bad guy. But I can point you to the exact moment when it became okay.
Yeah.
Kramer was bugging Jerry this was in the Junior Mint episode when Kramer was bugging Jerry to go view a surgery from Elaine's kind of overweight boyfriend. And he's just bugged, come on, Jerry, come on. And Jerry, during a rehearsal, he ad-libs and says, all right, let me finish my coffee and we'll watch him slice this fat bastard up. He just said it. He just did that, ad-libbed it in the middle of a rehearsal, and the laugh was so huge. I remember Larry turning to me and said, you think we could get away with that? I said, Larry, we can get away with anything.
Yeah, for real.
Once you do 22 minutes on masturbation, and you can get away with anything.
I only go about 15 myself. Yeah, gosh, so many brilliant moments, so many. Who are some of your favorite side characters, supporting characters to write for?
Well, Newman was always great. Jerry Stiller as George's father, and Estelle Harris as George's parents were fantastic to write. Yeah, and all the parents were great to write for.
For sure. Yeah.
Nobody else super stands out. Just mainly just the regulars. Like Newman and the parents.
Yeah,
those were like the main people.
Yeah. What's so funny too is just like, again, the fact that these characters never evolved, but all the people around them, all the boyfriends and girlfriends and coworkers, they're all like, you people are horrible.
Yeah.
It's still, and they have no idea. It's so great. I mean, maybe they do know. I guess they do know and they just don't care.
Yeah. I mean, the whole concept of likability was out the window.
Yeah. Also, I was thinking about this the other day when I knew that we were going to talk. I thought, isn't it funny that we actively, millions and millions of people actively watched people screaming at each other and fighting nonstop? It's just so fabulous.
And yet the next day, they're best of friends again.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They were really good friends. I mean, they could screw each other over at the drop of a hat, but it didn't affect their relationship.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, well, we're in a game now. Nothing personal, but I'm going to, completely ruin your day.
Yeah.
Well, tomorrow will be great. I love that.
I know you probably get asked this all the time, but I've never asked you this. Do you have a favorite couple episodes? And did you write them, your favorites?
No. I would say my favorite, believe it or not, was one of the early episodes. It was called The Deal, when Jerry and Elaine tried to negotiate a way they could remain friends and still have sex. I just thought that negotiation, those scenes, and the ensuing scene with Jerry and George was the greatest TV writing I'd ever seen. And that was before I was on staff. I mean, I was promised a job, for the next season. So I was going to all the shows. But I was sitting in there going, this is just the greatest thing in the world. And, I love that one. Larry did this. I'd say, not necessarily the whole episode, but certain story ideas. Larry had that idea of Jerry being caught making out during Schindler's List.
Yeah.
And, that is such a genius idea, because you have the entire show in front of you right there, because you think to yourself, okay, Jerry gets caught making out with his girlfriend during Schindler's List. Who's going to be offended by that? Well, his parents would be offended. But how are they going to find out? They can't be in the theater. It would be too coincidental. Somebody would have to drop a dime on him. Who would do that? Newman. You got a whole show. Boom, boom, boom. That used to happen to Larry all the time. It happened to me once, with the Sponge. I heard that the Sponge was going out of business, and I thought to myself, God, if Elaine's a Sponge user, she'd probably try to load up on them before they're all gone. And she'd only be able to get a limited number, so she'd have to change her entire screening process for who she sleeps with. Boom.
That conversation between those two for that scene is so hilarious. Your bathroom's in order? Yes, yes. Clean sheets? Yes.
You're gonna do something about those sideburns? Oh, yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
So funny. I can't even imagine the sheer level of brilliance happening at Mach speed, all around. Must have been quite an experience. How do you come down from that when you leave?
Well,
when you leave the show entirely, I mean.
You leave the show, and of course you have a development deal to come up with new shows. Mine was with DreamWorks, and you pitch a new show and it sells really fast. And after the table read of your pilot, the notes that you get from the network tell you one major thing. They tell you that they hated Seinfeld, that it broke all their rules, and they don't like that. Oh, they were fans of the show, but it broke all their rules. And they wanted my characters to be likable and, back to where it was. And I was like, why did you want to be in business with me if this is the kind of notes you're giving?
Yeah, we love you. We love you. Now we want to change everything about you.
So, it was a bit of a jolt, but, there really wasn't that much time to make the transition because, after I left before the final season. So I left, I was exhausted, it was really exhausting. And I kind of realized that I was, pretty tired. So I took it kind of easy that summer, even though I was already creating this pilot. And I had the table read for my pilot the morning after the filming of the last episode of Seinfeld. So I was on the Seinfeld set till like 1 a.m. and I just said to Larry and Jerry, well, I got to go. I got a table read at 10 a.m. And so there's really not much of a transition or time to, reflect or anything like that, which is good. Sure.
Now, how long were you writing your novels?
No.
That happened after the fact?
Way after.
Yeah.
Way after.
Is hashtag me as well a novel? Was that the first one?
Second.
That was the second one. Okay. The
first one was it
won't always
be this great.
It won't always be this great, right? And what brought you into writing novels? What was that impetus?
It's funny. I started writing a few things that were more fictional, and like some of them were getting published. I wrote one about this guy who had kind of a short story about a guy who had absolutely no opinions on anything. Hmm. And then I wrote this other piece for Esquire about Nelson Mandela's parole officer. And then, I'm having dinner with my old friend from college who lives out here. So we're still, best of friends, and his parents were out here. And his mother was talking about this neighborhood in Long Island that was always very Jewish, but now it became like super Orthodox. So like if you opened up your store in town on a Saturday, the Orthodox would freeze you out. And that just enraged me, like people foisting their views on everybody else, including on somebody else's livelihood.
They were so ahead of their time.
Yeah. It I don't know, but I was infuriated by it. And somehow it gave me this idea of a novel about somebody in that neighborhood. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It just kind of took off by itself.
It's a great read. I've read two of I haven't read your Mandela short stories book, but I've read the other two. They're great. I keep hoping that Me as Well is a TV show coming out.
The funny thing is, I had a Zoom call yesterday about It Won't Always Be This Great being a show.
Oh, great.
Yeah. It might actually happen, which would be like mind-blowing. Things have been happening with me, like not even paying any attention. I'm like, sure, go ahead.
Well, that's the way to do it, right? That's how the universe works. You have to let go. When you hold on to things too hard, they don't have room to happen.
The funny thing is, it's like, you write a novel, and if it comes out okay, like I felt pretty good about it. Like, and now it's like, okay, you did this. Now let's convert it to a lower form of art. Let's take out all the really good descriptions that you like and just make it dialogue. But, whatever.
And your career as a stand-up comic came late in life.
Yeah.
What made you decide to start doing stand-up comedy?
I met a girl at a party at a fundraiser that I decided to go to at the last second for God knows what reason. And she was working there, and we just started talking. And she told me she does stand up and she's got this show. And she was like, you should do it. You should try it. And I was like, okay. And, because I had like one joke lying around that for years that I thought if I ever did stand up, it would be my opening joke. And so I did it. And like if you have nothing at stake, and, it helps if you could write, but if you have nothing at stake, stand up is a lot easier. Mm-hmm. If your livelihood is depending on it, then it's hard.
That makes sense.
The whole idea of just not being nervous on stage I understand why, 98% of people are incredibly nervous to get up there, but, I wasn't, because I didn't feel like I had anything to prove. I was just, and even since I've been doing it, 4 or 5 years or whatever, it's like a hobby.
Mm-hmm. That does give you a lot more freedom.
I think I've cleared about $430 on my stand-up career.
Look at you. I hope you're investing it wisely.
Yes, I am.
Good.
Yeah.
You got to stop going to 7-Eleven for all the bubble gum. I mean, you'll never, ever save up enough if you keep doing that.
Yeah. And the lottery tickets.
Yes. Well, the lottery tickets might return investment. You never know.
It's really funny. A friend of mine from New York, somebody used to live out here. She's got this thing where, like, on your birthday, or like even on Valentine's Day, she likes to send her friends lottery tickets.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah. So I got this lottery ticket. I swear they're so complicated. I couldn't even figure out like what I was supposed to scratch or what could, the instructions to that were harder than the instructions to my laptop.
Yeah, some of them can be very hard. So you have to solve this Sudoku puzzle before you find out if you've won.
I mean, really,
I wonder if she has any kind of deal where if one of her friends wins, she gets half.
I'm going to have to ask her.
Might be a contract in there somewhere.
I would have liked her. She moved back to New York like 10 years ago, but she was really funny.
Yeah.
We just got friendly because she used to eat at Blue Plate, this lunch place that I basically used as my dining room as far as lunch was concerned. It was such a fun place. Did you ever go there?
Is it not open anymore?
No, it was on like 14th and Montana.
Probably before my time of getting here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. God, it was such a great little place, like a tiny little place, but always like crap, like the tables were kind of packed in and the food was really good. And you get like really fun people there. And then you get like this weird assortment of celebrities, like Sam Rockwell would eat there all the time. And
I love Sam Rockwell. He's probably one of my top favorite all-time actors.
He is so great. Mm-hmm. He is great. I mean, how great was he in Jojo Rabbit?
Oh, phenomenal. He's phenomenal in everything he does. He's absolutely wonderful. I just on a whim, I watched a movie that I saw go across I think it was on Netflix or Amazon or something. It was Blue Iguana. And it was fantastic.
I don't know if I saw that. Yeah.
It's a fun one. I think he can make any movie delightful, honestly. He's just that good. So you're working on the new book. Mm-hmm. And when is that coming out?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't know when, if, or what.
I'm sure it'll come out, but
yeah, I mean, it's like a really high concept thing. So
yeah, people love that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And, like I'm like 110 pages in and I don't even know. I'm kind of fighting against losing the forest for the trees, but I don't mind it. I'm just, whatever it's like, takes me like 78 pages to realize something that I should be writing, that I should have written about, like right at the top. And then I just go, oh my God, I start a whole chapter by saying, an embarrassingly delinquent thought.
There you go.
And I just wrote this whole thing about how, being a childless woman is actually 10 times harder than being a childless man. Like your best friend gets pregnant, you got to start like, feel it. You got, you get suddenly all of a sudden you're talking about amniocentesis, all these things you have no experience over. And, you got to feel the baby bump. For guys, it's like, you don't have to do, oh, your wife's pregnant. Oh, I didn't know you had it in you. So how about those nicks? I mean.
Expectations are, I was once in a cab in San Francisco or an Uber or whatever. I got in and pretty much right away, the guy asked me, so do you have children? And I said, no, sir. He's like, oh, that must be very hard for you. And I said, on the contrary, it's actually not hard at all. It's quite easy. And he said, oh, well, but you're not really you haven't really lived life until you had children. And I thought, I think I'm doing okay, but thank you. It was just such a weird conversation to have with a total stranger.
Yeah, it's, it's amazing just, how they need converts.
Yeah.
And, I'm not telling, friends with a wife and kids that, I'm not saying, okay, you should dump off your wife and kids and, go to Club Med and, I don't know. And it's so funny that, the most conventional thing in the world, which is, getting married and having kids, that's considered like true living.
I just figured between Elon Musk and Nick Cannon, I don't need to have a kid because they've sort of covered, they're doing it for all of us.
Oh, God.
They're having lots of babies, so I don't have to.
I can't believe I saw this thing about Elon Musk, dissing Dr. Fauci.
Oh, yeah.
A man of science.
I know.
Elon Musk dissing this great man of science. I can't even look at the news.
It's gotten very weird out there. That is for sure.
That's why
Peter, do you
I stay in.
Yeah, exactly. Except for when we go to lunch and breakfast.
Yes.
Do you have a place for people to find you, a website that is yours or on social? I know you're on Instagram.
There is a petermehlman.com. I don't really do much on it, but I think somebody else does. Maybe. I don't know. I never check it. And, I'm on Twitter.
It's now a porn site. Sorry.
Yeah, can you imagine? The only reason I know it's not is because I would get much more response.
The residuals would be nice. No pun intended.
Yeah. I'm Peter Mehlman on Twitter and Facebook.
Well, I'll put links for everything on heyhumanpodcast.com, including links to your books and so that people can find it easily.
And I could give you my home address in Wyoming.
Mm-hmm. Did they really used to put your phone number on news articles that you wrote for people to contact you? Oh, okay. When you said that you got a bunch of people reaching out to you after that one article, I thought, my God, did they used to put?
No, I was in the phone book.
Oh, a phone book. What's that?
Yeah, I was in the phone book, and the article started with me walking up and saying that I was walking up East 63rd Street, and it was unbelievable.
Wow. Have you ever had a stalker?
No. Well, maybe my next door neighbor, but no. Have you?
Yeah, I have, but they were very gentle as far as. One sent me a piece of chocolate cake in the mail because during a show I had mentioned how good the chocolate cake looked. And then about a week later, I received a slice of chocolate. I have no idea who sent it, but it's a weird thing to get in the mail. And then another time at a show, this is a musical show, I can't remember if it was around Valentine's Day or not, but somebody sent me a big bouquet of flowers anonymously. It's a very gentle stuff, nothing threatening or weird.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Nobody turning up in the bushes or anything.
No. I never got anyone masturbating, in front of me from. Yeah. I mean, I have had that, but that was welcomed. I haven't had it as a surprise.
I think you're totally stalkable. I don't understand it.
It's very sweet, I think. Peter, I love you. You're a delight. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. I love you too. And coffee.
Yes,
breakfast.
We will. Absolutely. Give Ike a pat from me and a hug and a piece of bacon.
Hey, when we originally met, I asked you if you want. You said to me if you ever need a dog sitter.
I did, and you kind of looked at me like, "Is this person crazy?" I had no idea who you were, though. It's funny because I turned around. You went into the. Because I was like, oh, I'll watch your dog while you go in and get coffee. And I turned around and my two friends who are, big television writers, their eyes were like saucers. They're like, you know him? I was like, no, who? Because I didn't know, I'd only just moved, whatever. And they're like, that's Peter Mehlman. Oh my God. They were so fangirling you. It was great.
Oh God. That's crazy. Time I need you.
Okay, what for? Oh, for dog sitting?
Yeah.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
If you're around.
I am around, yes. We'll talk about this offline so people don't know when you're leaving town.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I'm such an idiot.
That's okay. Thank you for listening, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Peter.
Yeah.
Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.